everyone. Welcome to the Political Insider. I'm your humble host, Brett Smith. Joining me today is a special guest. Kyle Becker is the host of the podcast Relentless and the CEO and founder of Becker News. He's a former associate producer and writer at Fox News and frequently seen on The Blaze, Timcast, and Rubin Report. You can also find his work on Substack at the Relentless Newsletter. Kyle, great to see you.
And yeah, you too, today. Brett. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this, about politics with you. And
it's been a crazy week, man. This has just been nuts. I was having trouble actually picking topics, preparing for this. So
yeah, it's one of those weeks, like the last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I mean, you got the media bloodbath, you got all this stuff going on. I mean,
yeah. Well, let's start off with that first. The news that took everyone by surprise: the shot heard around the world Monday. The firing of Tucker Carlson from Fox News. Yeah, I think Don Lemon. I think everyone kind of surprised. I wasn't really surprised about that, him getting canned. I think we all saw that coming. It wasn't like a matter of if, it was a matter of when, just considering that everybody hated the guy. Right. But Tucker was FNC's top-rated show, and I think a major reason why many conservatives still tune into Fox News, despite the network's kind of lurch to the left in recent years. Do you think this had to do with the Dominion lawsuit settlement and January 6th footage, which he aired, and possibly maybe more what he was allowed to talk about going forward on his show? Or was this just about money in the sense that FNC's been losing, I've read close to 50 million in lost ad revenue by sponsors who simply refuse to advertise during his show. So, and then there's also this talk about the Murdochs planning to sell FNC soon. So I was thinking, maybe getting rid of Tucker, getting rid of Dan Bongino and Laura Trump, and placing more sort of mainstream conservatives into those slots, allow more ad revenue to come flowing back in. And also, it kind of takes sort of the edge out of Fox, makes it possibly easier to make that kind of a sale. What do you think?
I think you raise a lot of intriguing possibilities, and we won't know on the record until Tucker Carlson, if he can, if he takes a golden parachute, we might not know exactly what happened for a long time.
Right.
Because of the contract clause, which for the same reason, I'm only going to talk about what's publicly reported. Because, I parted ways with Fox News myself, along with a lot of other people right after the 2020 election. So,
right. And he could have a non-compete potentially, right?
Not non-compete, depends on how high, like the talent might have a non-compete,
okay,
but others, have different clauses in their contracts, which, kind of limit what they can say about the inner machinations of Fox News.
Sure.
So, but according to the reports, I can tell you that the New York Times leaked the lawsuit filing from the Dominion case. And in it, we only get the backdrop of what Paul Ryan is said to have expressed about the direction of Fox News. And from what the document says, it's a pivot away from Trump. He talked about his fiduciary duty to the shareholders, and to prevent sort of litigation and risk based on sort of the 2020 election allegations and things that they aired, which, obviously we know what Rupert Murdoch testified about that, how that went down. And he was very critical, like very surprisingly critical about that coverage. Now, did the lawsuit lead ineluctably to to Tucker Carlson and Fox News parting ways? The interesting thing about that is Bill O'Reilly, which I'm sure he has Fox News contacts, but we don't know for sure how much he's talking out of pocket or he is actually onto something.
Mm-hmm.
There are like at least 3 lawsuits already facing Fox News, serious ones, like the Abby Grossberg one. They just settled the Dominion one, and they're looking at potential Smartmatic, I think, in the future. Yeah, potentially. This is what Bill O'Reilly said, actually.
No, I bet Bill's still plugged in over there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
He wouldn't go off half-cocked.
He knows something. He knows something. I don't know how much exactly he knows. He knows something. He has little birdies there, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And so he mentioned potential coming lawsuits. Now, if we go to the Vanity Fair article, Brett, which I'm sure you saw, the interesting thing is that they were in contract negotiations. They planned to keep him, I believe, offhand to 2029.
Wow.
If I think that's right. So they were in the middle of contract negotiations when supposedly Tucker was blindsided with news that led to him leaving the network. So it's not clear to me that, you hear that he was fired. I'm not sure that's what happened. Rupert Murdoch, Lachlan Murdoch, based on reportings from like LA Times, for example, may have pressured for more executive creative control over his show. And one of the backdrops, objectively, if you look at the shows he did on the January 6th tapes, I believe that really it started off very confrontational with a lot of explosive footage that really directly challenged the Democratic Party's narrative and this and seemingly the state narrative about how that actually played out, and raised a lot of very difficult to answer questions for anyone. This footage really speaks more than anything Tucker Carlson could say in a monologue, in my opinion. And that's really what made him a hot, a hot potato potentially. So, you saw AOC on Sunday before Tucker was announced to have left Fox News that she wanted him out. She said he was dangerous, accused him of, leading his rhetoric leading to violence.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, she gloated on one of her, I believe it was TikTok, if I'm not mistaken. She was gloating about it. Deplatforming works, right? I mean, and when I was watching that, just so smug, like, and also just there was some dishonesty, I believe, in what she was saying, but she's so she's so clever and so coy, and I think Tucker will come back more powerful, almost like, Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. You strike him down, he becomes more powerful. But Tucker will land on his feet. He'll do something great with less editorial control. But Fox, I think Roger Ailes, said basically Fox News is a machine. I think he said, if I'm mistaken, you put up a dead raccoon or something and still get ratings. That's not exactly true. Now, if you dig down into the ratings, Brett, and you talked about losing advertising, that may be true that advertisers were reluctant to advertise with Tucker Carlson. But Tucker, he took over for Bill and had like 3 years of like not very good ratings, like soft ratings is what Bill O'Reilly called it.
That's true.
And he was able to turn it around with more hard right, but not really orthodox right, more of like contrarian right, just like anti-establishment, right?
Exactly.
Kind of an anti-establishment voice. And he was much stronger in the demo, the key advertising demo of 25 to 54 than his competitors. So, the translation is not one-to-one about, being like 20% higher than Jesse and Sean on average in the demo. But he was attracting so many younger people and Democrats and independents much more. And this was leading to both positive and negative buzz around his show that I think was like, it's hard to put a price on that because Fox News was relevant because of Tucker Carlson.
That's right.
Yeah, the others can pull ratings, but it's a much older set in their ways. They don't use TikTok or Twitter. They don't use these things. So they just put it on because it makes them feel comfortable. Right. And they want their conservative values to be in their household, to reflect their views. And it makes them feel like their voices are heard, to hear Sean or Laura or whoever say similar things, in a familiar way. Sure. Tucker there's nothing familiar about his monologues, right? It was taking the hottest topics, the most sensitive topics from January 6th to the Russia-Ukraine war to the 2020 election and looking for counter narratives. Tucker, I'm sure, and his staff were very aware of the overall media environment, right? And the preferred narratives. His lightning rod approach was to prime counter narratives and push back against them. And his critics accuse him of being like dishonest or cherry picking, but really it's just being a gadfly, like Socrates. You know? It's challenging you on what you think and the narratives that you support and put out. sometimes reflexively or unthinkingly. And I think that's what, Tucker had outgrown the network. And I think the media environment as a whole is much more friendly to people like him who are independent thinkers and gadflies. I mean, look at Russell Brand,
I know
how he's doing for himself, Joe Rogan. They're not really, I know Russell's a socialist technically, but they're really gadflies, right?
It's the strange bedfellows kind of thing. I would say even Elon Musk. I said I think to some degree they're converts. And they're also they're Gen Xers. They're a little bit older, which is a positive thing. There's not that many of us. There's only about 68 million, but I think that we come from a different time in America, which we were talking about off air, which is definitely very politically incorrect and very unwoke. We're much more interested in, I think, seeing the truth and facing it, even if it's potentially painful.
I call it the ugly truth sometimes.
Yeah, and it can be, and that's okay. I'm not going to sit here and deny that, because that's just part of life. Is that yin and that yang? But I think that that kind of understanding of life and politics just comes from being around a while. Basically, it's just nothing. It's nothing more special than just a little bit more life experience than we have on maybe the people in their 20s, 30s. And then the older millennials, but who I think are basically kind of the same. Jack Kosovic calls them the centennials, or the early 80s babies, and we all had sort of a very similar childhood. But I think like you, I think it's a great observation that Tucker outgrew that place, because it brings me to my second question, which is, do you think that the 24-hour cable news programming template has outlived its usefulness? Because it's kind of like, do you need, if you're somebody like Tucker, if you're somebody like Joe Rogan or Russell Brand, do you really need that? Do you need that platform? Those guys obviously kind of created their own universes, similar to Andrew Breitbart, carved out his own little universe of Breitbart in the beginning, with big Hollywood and big government and all the different verticals. But it's kind of like, where do you see somebody like Tucker landing? And I think that applies to even other people who might bounce out of Fox, or up and comers. Do you need to kind of set your sights and say, yes, I've got to work at the 24-hour alphabet network, whether it's cable news or network news, in order to be successful, have an audience, and make a difference?
I believe there are a lot of technological changes in the backgrounds that have changed the media terrain since CNN started in the 1980s. So people have mobile phones now and can watch on demand through different social media platforms that compete against one another. I would like to see more competition, but
me too.
Hopefully we'll get there eventually. And also on demand through internet, like through through a PC, laptop, television. It's more.
I'm watching Newsmax through Pluto TV, or their app.
There you go. Yeah, and it's less appointment viewing also. And so people are more like on their time. Instead of you going to be on a TV show's time, the TV show comes to be on your time, and you get it that way. So 24/7 cable news networks is really more of a background. It's become more of a background thing, or a big event, like a big shared event, like a State of the Union address or a national emergency. People might go and just have it on to keep monitoring it constantly.
Like on 9/11.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of day-to-day viewing, our life, we're very stretched. We don't have a lot of us, and I don't know if the COVID pandemic actually may play a backdrop to this too, because, we are more, a lot more of us work from home or do like gig working, and we're managing a lot of different things in our daily lives, and it's not on the banker's hours, like 9 to 5.
Right.
We're getting a lot more flexibility in terms of our daily routines. I think a lot of us in, like, at least the not white collar, but outside of, like, daytime work, outside construction or, whatever, sanitation worker, for example. But I think like a lot of the more, middle class, jobs that aren't like service sector jobs, for example, we get a lot more flexibility, and we're the most likely to consume this, like college educated people.
Mhm.
And I think just we have a natural inclination towards we see more of a market choices
Mhm.
in what's available, and there's almost too much of it. Really, there's almost I mean and so what I find is I can't. I heard this about Tucker Carlson, by the way, that he doesn't really watch the news, and I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I read what I want, and I listen to people, usually
Mhm.
people who I like. They comment on it. I want to comment too. I want to be a part of the conversation, so I'll
Sure.
read it and I'll comment on it. And I find like social media is a lot more the monopoly days where I have to listen to Caitlin Collins or Don Lemon tell me what breaking news is and get their commentary is pretty much over,
Right.
because I can get it before them from
Yeah.
people who I like and from people who are interesting
Yeah.
instead of just being a talking head reading off a teleprompter and trying to come off the cuff or whatever. I can go to who I like and get their opinions. And this sort of segmentation sets up very well for Tucker Carlson. So Tucker Carlson can break away from Fox and become a magnet for conversation in a way that, like, even at Fox, I think like the brand was he was within Fox News, and there's sort of like battling brands here. His brand was not the same as Sean's or any, very
Yeah.
few other people.
Yeah.
He's more confrontational, but he can step outside of Fox and actually be a bigger brand. Fox is relieved because they don't have this iconoclast in the middle of their easygoing,
Yeah.
GOP establishment friendly,
I know.
octogenarian friendly sort of viewing where
Yeah.
everything's calm and nice and they're not the target of boycott campaigns and lawsuits. And Tucker gets to be like, all right, I can say whatever I want. It's my opinion. It's,
Mhm.
established in a court of law that, I have an opinion and I'm putting out valid opinions. And so I'm protected. Fox is protected.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for him. And look, I mean, you can make a living if you can attract like a rule of 1,000, right? If you can get 1,000 people to subscribe to you and listen to you, you can make a living.
Mhm.
Tucker will get millions of subscribers. I mean, like millions. Dan
Yeah.
Bongino himself, he has like over 2 million people on Rumble.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
because people have to go out of their way to go to Rumble. Usually, it's not as
Mhm.
interwoven in the other platforms as some of the others, but
Yeah.
people will go to Rumble.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the same way as they go to YouTube, and that's becoming more and more. It's not so much to me, but I think for younger people, it's no different than flipping channels at this point. And that's just another. That's kind of like a channel aggregator, the same as Rumble is, and you just kind of flip channels and subscribe to the ones that you like, which is no different than kind of like favoriting your favorite channels on Pluto TV or
or the
elsewhere.
Political Insider.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of just the natural progression of how things change from that standpoint of you went from having four major network channels to having I remember in the 80s if you had like 60 channels that was a lot. Then the dish came along and you had thousands of channels. So and now it's switched to YouTube where it's kind of the same thing. There's just multiple people you can sub to and that you can find
So,
just about anything really.
and I think the elites are not happy that they had a bottleneck of
Absolutely.
information, and the internet has democratized the information and made it
Yeah.
more knowledge and widespread. The elites are very threatened. I mean, I wrote a piece about Dr. Fauci this morning on my Substack. It kind of goes to that,
Mhm.
and how central planning is almost irrelevant with as much complexity and ability to instantaneously share knowledge among hundreds of millions of people and to locally apply the knowledge to their conditions. You don't really need this sort of one size fits all universal policies
Right.
emanating from Washington, D.C. What you need is more of a variety of different adaptations. And I think like that's when I was so attracted to DeSantis. I'm like, yes, he's really looking at local conditions. He's not doing the one size fits all thing. He, protects seniors. Yes, vaccination might help seniors.
Yeah.
If you're anti-vax, you don't want to hear that. But guess what? I think he was right there to push it, especially for seniors. But if you're younger, later on, the Surgeon General came forward and said you might not need it if you're younger, especially if you have natural immunity. That's the kind of nuanced thing that we weren't getting out of Washington, and I think like, and so that by extension to what we were talking about, you almost, if you ever read a book called Masters of the Word, it's like the history of like Gutenberg Press to now.
Cool.
It's a pretty good book. It talks about this power struggle about democratizing information and like the elites trying to, and if everything from like using Latin in the church to, the Gutenberg Press and so on, all the way to the modern era, radio, and how radio is different than, other media. But the point was that the elites are trying to claw back this sort of democratizing of information by saying things that are misinformation, that are, and there's a whole, there's been some great reporting on it recently about the censorship industrial complex. And the US government is like really bridging First Amendment rights pretty openly and unashamedly now.
Absolutely.
And so anybody who doesn't follow a certain narrative is now deemed dangerous, like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, exactly.
Asking questions is now dangerous. No, it's the foundation of a deliberative democracy. You have to ask questions and trust the people to deliberate on it. But it seems like one side, the woke left, is now saying that if you disagree with them, you're dangerous. Well, that's not how a free country or a deliberative democracy works.
Well, that's, we were talking about AOC, celebrating Tucker getting fired and saying how his show, quote, incited violence, and that FNC canning him proves that, quote, deplatforming works. I mean, she said that. She's like, we see that deplatforming works. And, once again, the Democrats make the case that in order to save democracy, you have to suspend democracy and free speech, as well as prevent people they disagree with from earning a living by canceling them, essentially. And, in the past, 80s, 90s, Republicans and Democrats, basically just offered up their ideas for the future, and we debated them in the public square so as to allow, the person with the best ideas to win. That's not who the Democrats are anymore. Now they not only want to shut down all debate, but they also want to have those they disagree with basically like disappeared. And, when do you think the Democrat Party changed, and how do Republicans understand this isn't the same Democrat Party of old? They're fighting, and, using the same old techniques of debate. That kind of stuff just doesn't work anymore. And in order to combat them, it's going to require tactics far more radical, like answering their kind of preemptive attacks that they make with lawfare, maybe with our own.
Sure. Their arguments are so divergent from reality right now that I find that anybody who just goes about their daily business, like in middle America or in daily life, would have a hard time understanding it. These are arguments from academics, left-wing academics, who redefine things like white supremacists and Nazis and fascists to describe people who are freedom-loving, believe in the rule of law, and just want to be left alone. I mean, I come from an academic background. I read political theory and all this in the PhD level, and I know that they are intentionally distorting the familiar political framework that you could go to if you read about World War II, for example, Brett, or what is fascism. And they're really endorsing fascist policies, according, if you look at Mussolini or look at and at the same time accusing the people who just want freedom and to be left alone and to respect the Constitution that brought the government into existence as fascists. No, my grandfather killed fascists.
Same here.
It had nothing to do. Fascism doesn't have anything to do with, how this country was founded and individual rights and
not even
freedom.
Close. Yeah.
So
no, that's an Alinsky tactic, which is to accuse your opponent of.
It has to be plausible.
Doing what you're doing.
Rules for radicals and reveille for radicals. You have to put it within the I'm trying to think of how he put it.
They have to put it within the context.
The daily experience. It has to be within the perspective of the daily experience of your target audience.
Right.
So those things are not comporting with the experience of most people's daily lives. It's just a lot of rhetoric and jargon.
Mhm.
But to go back to what you were asking about, like when did the Democratic Party take a turn? I think Clarence Thomas hearings. I agree with Andrew Breitbart to some extent. That was a major shift.
Yeah.
And we've seen that 3 decades in, they're still fighting to get Clarence Thomas off the court, bring these ethical violations. Chief Justice John Roberts has had to issue a letter to Senate Judiciary Chairman Dick Durbin telling him we have ethical guidelines. There's a separation of powers. It's very unusual, extremely rare for people to testify in front of this committee for the reasons that you bring up. And the other justices agreed that the ethics in place work for the most part, and they're not going to participate in this, which would be a political theater.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 3
it
decades,
could be them next.
they just never quit. So they just can't accept, he's a black conservative. He flies in the face of their narrative in so many ways. If you read any biography about Clarence Thomas, being poor and having to work his way up, he made it to the top of the government, has had what I believe to be a highly respectable, if not, pristine job on the court. And they still want to remove him after all this time or pack the courts. And this is who they are now.
Yeah.
They don't have any respect for our institutions unless they serve the means to their end of their agenda.
Yeah.
And I saw today, just by extension, an interesting thing. Just bring up something about I don't know if you know about Schedule F.
No, I don't.
It's something that Trump brought up. The Trump campaign supporters have brought up about re-implementing this so you can fire federal workers. Just en masse. The point is that so many of our federal employees act like they donate to the Democratic Party, like 95% and plus, like in the IRS and, Department of Education, all the way down the list. They're like 90 to 100%. This doesn't happen naturally. Like it's not an organic thing. So like you could say, if you've ever donated to a political party, any political party, or campaigned for them, then you're no longer eligible to work at these agencies. And that's it. You can make a blanket executive order and that would be it. And you would get rid of a lot of the activists and the 0.1% of people who donated to the Republican Party. So my point is that most people don't want an activist partisan government, especially in bureaucracies.
Absolutely not.
I don't want that. I want it to be kind of like the Department of Transportation or something, where you go in, you fill out a form. They say, hey, I mean, hopefully more efficiently, but they're very terrible at efficiency. Most places, they've gotten a little better. I'll try to give some credit, but that's it. It's just an exchange and they're out of your lives.
Right.
Like they're there to serve you and not the other way around. And that's the extent of it. But now it's so weaponized across our government that, it's really is causing so much division and conflict, Brett, that I just don't, it's like they live in a different world, like on the East Coast, the West Coast, and they're just trying to, gobble us all up with their
politics. I know. Everyone in flyover country, right?
I've lived all over this country, Brad. I mean, like, I don't know where you've lived before. Where are you at now, by the way? If
I'm in Texas, but
Texas, same here. I'm in the Dallas area.
Okay.
I love it here. I just moved from New York.
Bell County.
But New York and Texas are completely different beasts.
Oh yeah.
They should have different rules.
Yeah.
South Carolina, Florida, California, we should all have different rules, but elitists can't accept that. So
Well, I know. It's I mean, it's strange to me how Democrats have changed, but and I wish Republicans could understand and accept that they're not the same people. And I like this idea of Schedule F because, bureaucrats are unelected, and they can just kind of run amok. And I just think that there's way too many of them. It takes like an average of like 2 years to fire a federal worker. I mean, it's nuts.
Look at what Elon Musk did with Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
80% gone. Yeah. It works better than ever.
Yeah.
If you're not interested in censorship and political activism, it works.
Right,
it
and
can work.
they're adding some new features. I mean, it's exciting what's going on over there, and they're also trying to turn a profit, which
Yeah,
is I know a really novel idea.
and I think part of it's the education system, like the glut of people that are being churned out with like useless degrees. They have nowhere to go except into bureaucracies of one kind or another, whether it be
Mm,
education bureaucracy
that's a good
or
point.
the government, for example, or local governments or what have you.
Yeah,
But uh, there that increases the demand among very smart people who have nothing else to do. They have no really meaningful occupation except for, into government or activist or NGO role.
yeah,
So, really the education system running amok is a really foundational structural problem
hmm
in this country, where I felt like I had to go to grad school and beyond, and like even extend more of my school just to like, no, seriously, I'm a scholar. I really can do good work. I'm
right,
not just somebody who got my bachelor's degree out of a cereal box.
hmm
I mean, I like know how to do good work.
right,
And I felt like, and that caused me to take on more debt, like in the graduate school at least.
sure,
And and that created student debt problem, and it's become like a woke indoctrination factory over there,
hmm
where they're just milking the federal government, and it's just a systemic problem. Just
yeah,
forget the quality of their ideas, which are just shoddy and
yeah,
terrible most of the time. uh they don't really add anything of value to American society. Really, what they are is their ideas are constantly damaging American society.
hmm
We have I've said this before, we have like the most useless literati in world history. Like, they really
yeah,
contribute nothing at this point. They just talk to each other in these
yes,
journals, and was it peer reviewed or not peer reviewed? And like anybody, you get like during COVID or whatever, you get like all of this stuff from this literati, and you just ask simple question. Well, where's the evidence that masks work? Can I see that? Okay, I'm gonna
yeah.
look at all the literature before the COVID pandemic to see if anybody says that airborne pathogens and
Well, there was
viruses
plenty.
are
There was
stopped
plenty
by.
of it. They just censored it all on
They
Facebook and
keep
censored
going
it
and
on
going.
Twitter.
Yeah, okay, we don't
That's
have
the
to get into that.
crazy
I
part.
brought up because
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci had kind of a mea culpa about this
I
recently.
saw that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw that.
okay.
That was
That's why I
crazy.
brought it up, because it's generally
Oh, man.
safe
I
to
mean,
talk about. It's like 10% effectiveness for like the general
yeah.
cloth and
Right, right.
surgical mask.
Yeah, we'll find out if YouTube allows us
I
to
think
talk
so,
about
because of
it.
the recent news. Well, let's hope they caught the news. I think they
Yeah,
did, because it was in the
they
Times.
need to update the algorithm.
Okay. All right. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Fair
So,
enough.
something else I wanted to bring up was this video that Joe Biden dropped. His reelection announcement was yesterday, and the video is really bizarre. He sounded so weak, and he's like whispering, and doing that
Mhm.
kind of grandpa whisper. It was full of platitudes and slogans and cliches. And funny enough, it didn't mention one success or like major milestone from his first term. Instead it was just kind of like this montage of really quick, kind of quick clips, good music, I think solid production quality, but it ended by Joe asking Americans to vote for him so we can, quote, finish the job. And I'm just kind of like, wow,
That's
considering
it.
the damage that the Biden administration has done to America in its first
Well,
term.
he's going to complete the fundamental transformation that
Dude, I mean, it's like,
his former boss wanted to implement, right?
yeah, I mean, double-digit inflation, double gas prices, bank failures, huge increases in food, goods, and services, pushing the trans agenda and like a proxy war in Ukraine with Russia, with the potential of World War III. I mean, it's kind of like,
Yeah,
what do you
you
think
hit
he
the major
means?
ones. Yeah.
By let's finish the job. And it got to me thinking that it's kind of like, in order to build back better, we have to destroy the America that you and I were born into first. We've got to complete the demolition, and then we can build back better.
This is the way Marxists have always framed it. Um, if I would criticize this video, I would say, if you ever read Eric Hoffer's The True Believer,
Yeah, no, I know
it's
exactly
like
what
if
you're talking
you
about.
tore the liner notes out of that and said, here, this is how you make a video when you have a candidate who stands for nothing, has done nothing, but you want to mobilize a mass movement behind them
Yeah,
that is really us versus them. And that's it. That's all you do, because it's a lot easier to run against something than to stand for something. It
yeah,
makes you a target. And that's the same way that neo-Marxists, which like they're not really the Marxists, they're more like the Hegelian ideological Marxists,
Yes.
cultural
Yes.
Marxists.
Oh yeah.
They have always been like that. Critical theory, you're always on the offensive, you're always criticizing, you're always standing up for grievance groups. So you have your little grievance client groups with African Americans and trans people is the latest iteration. They can't stop. Actually,
they
they
just
always keep looking for more.
chopping them up. Yeah, they just
They always look for
bifurcate.
more client groups to
Yeah.
weaponize. And they're always on the offensive, but you don't really know what they stand for. So they cannot they cannot point to a more successful system of government that is fair to people and gives them opportunity and respects their rights and makes their life better than the one that the American founders came up with and that we perfected through amendments over the course of hundreds of years.
Right.
They can't point to that, but they feel like they don't have to because they're always on offensive criticizing.
Mm-hmm.
So that necessarily entails it's kind of like a just trust us, bro approach. They level everything. And it's just like, just trust us, bro. We'll rebuild this back better. But the problem is America was one of the strongest, most advanced, most powerful, wealthiest countries in the world, starting in about the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, with one of the biggest middle classes.
Exactly.
And we have the track record, and we've improved on civil rights. But the improvement on civil rights, they commandeered that, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's inherent in the logic of the Declaration of Independence. It's inherent in the logic of the actual import of the Constitution and like the 3/5 clause. That was supposed to make slavery harder to justify in the South.
True. That's true. That's the camel under the
deportation of slaves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All of this stuff. So we've had progress, and it came from the founding in large part, almost, for the most part, had a secure government until about 2020, stability, normal transfer of power. And you could argue that all the way up to then. We're not going to get into the January 6th stuff. I don't want to get into that.
We don't have to.
But to debate how much of that destabilized the government, for example. But it did. Since 2000, we could say the government has been somewhat destabilized.
Sure.
But the Marxist left, they're always on offense. They give you almost nothing as a target. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like, but I think like in some ways, they are making themselves a target by going after children. Yeah. Like it's really, I think the last few years you could say the Democratic Party has been a very anti-child party. And I think that's a very risky gamble on their part. Like, I think if the messaging was right, suburban moms, women, given the right candidate, we can argue about that.
Yeah,
would sign on to somebody who protects their children, like girls' sports, not targeting their kids, like to make them question their gender identity.
Yeah.
The abortion stuff is a mixed issue. I think it can go too strong in either direction.
Yeah.
I think most people are kind of in the middle. They're having a trimester debate.
I think it's when
the media debate is ban it all, no exceptions, or let it all go up to the very end. Most people aren't like that.
Yeah, anyway. No, absolutely. I also think the only thing that you're leaving out there is CRT and the crazy education stuff, and that kind of came out through COVID. And Republicans all of a sudden were like, wait a minute, teachers boards and people who set curriculum and whatnot, education boards and people who are determining curriculum, like these are important. Like we need to pay attention to these things. We need to go to these meetings and whatnot and see what they're teaching our kids and what kind of curriculum is involved and what books are basically a part of the curriculum. That sort of was the beginning of sort of, I think, the unraveling of a lot of this stuff where you're talking about them going after children. And then, and now it's the trans stuff and on and on and on. I just think that, like, absolutely, I don't think there's any more powerful message that Republicans could make to suburban women is they're coming after your children from every single institution possible, from education, mainstream education, government funded education.
Did you hear what Joe Biden said? He was talking to educators. Just recently, he said,
Yeah.
like, there's no such thing as your child. I'm paraphrasing loosely.
Yeah.
No such
No,
thing as your child. That, it's everybody's
there
child.
are
Like,
children.
she was quoting another teacher. I'll put
Yes.
that out there too. But he doubled down on that and like really underscored like
It was
he
very,
believes that's right.
Hillary, it takes a village. That's what it reminded me
Yes,
of. And
that's
then there was
totally.
that girl with the tampon earrings on MSNBC years ago talking about how, we,
Is that Jamil
our
Hill?
children are our children, and we all raise them together.
Right.
Um,
Oh yeah, I remember that.
some
Yeah.
crap. Yeah, I mean, but it's just, it's pure cultural Marxism. And I think, when we're talking about, how the Democrat Party's changed, I think they've been hijacked by cultural Marxists.
Absolutely. And I spent time, I studied neo-Marxism, like cultural Marxism when I was in grad school. I saw the way they were. And there was another conservative in the class that just dared to speak up. Like he had a blog or whatever. They like viciously attacked him, like right in
Oh
the
yeah,
middle of the class. And
I've
I'm like,
been
oh.
there. I've
And
been
then
there.
like some people were like writing letters, like I'm leaving not the faculty, I'm leaving the department because of all this discrimination against people of different ideological viewpoints. It's like not open anymore. This was in New York. And
That's too bad.
I've read all of that and I'm just like,
Sucks.
and I've also saw people who came in who were very common sense and level-headed become radicalized by the program. And I remember talking, the diversity of their faculty was like, what different kind of Marxist are you? Are you Marxist-Leninist? Are you Maoist? Are you Fabian socialist? That was the diversity.
They're always white. They're always usually white. That's the funny part.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them. Yeah, I think almost all. There was a Chinese lady too.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
Yeah.
But,
she didn't experience Mao.
But their ideas generally train and indoctrinate. Like it trickles down. It really to every profession. Lawyers, journalists. Like
no,
that's the thing is you can't avoid it. So if you are compartmentalizing this and go, oh, he's just a woke professor. No, that woke professor is trained dozens, if not hundreds, of successful people.
Yeah.
Think of the chain effect of that over the course of like 30 years.
Exactly.
From like 1970s when the American Political Science Association was hijacked.
Yeah. No, I mean, Yuri Bezmenov. Yuri Bezmenov, the KGB defector from '84. He's got is all over YouTube. You can find his interview where he's talking about, they're basically, pumping Marxism into the as Rush used to call them, the skulls full of mush.
So, right. Yeah, he says something very similar. And I'm a Russian area specialist by training, and like I've read other defectors similar to Yuri Bezmenov.
Ideological subversion.
Yeah, right. There are other great defectors. If you read them, they'll give you a lot of good insight into the cultural battle that we're having. And one of the things that's really odd if you bring up is just like the obsession with Russia over the last is very strange for me as a Russian area scholar, because like when I started off into Russian area studies, it was kind of like, well, you're kind of on the side of the discipline. I'd studied in high school. I had a great teacher who did Spanish and Russian, so I took Russian. It's like, well, I need it for politics. I can study the Cold War, the past. It was very backwards looking. Yeah. Then after I got out of grad school and I studied in Moscow, I was a journalist in Moscow, like just a copy editor for independent news, economic news wire, right? So I got out of that. It took like 8 to 10 years, and then I started hearing like this Russia stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's odd. And then, it just kept being about Russia, and it still continues to be about Russia. I always found that very odd. Like it's because the Democratic Party I've always viewed them as soft on Russia. Always. Like during the Cold War.
They were sympathetic to them during the Cold War.
They're the boogeyman for everything. Like there's something really weird about that. And I feel there's something to why they feel like Russia is the boogeyman, but not China. Like why not China? Like China is way more of a threat to us.
They're way more like the Soviet
infiltrated
Union.
and bought off people, Brett, and it just doesn't add up to me.
Well, I mean, I remember Democrats being sympathetic with the USSR in the 80s and in the early 90s. Just the same as they're sympathetic to Fidel Castro. They have this romantic, just twisted and perverted, but romantic version of communism. One which doesn't have all the mass graves, and the atrocities. It's pure fantasy, and it's this idea that, oh well, if the right communists were in charge, then we'd have the best form of communism. Like I said, it's fantasy land. But it flipped at some point in time, and I think it flipped obviously when Trump came around, and they needed some kind of something to hang around his neck, and also something to use as leverage against him. And so Russia somehow, all of a sudden became the bad guy, even though it's like I said, they've just,
and they are bad.
well, yeah, they're not great
Obviously,
people.
and like
Yeah.
Putin is definitely
He's a bad guy.
He's a strong man. He hijacked the executive branch there. He should have been out of office a long time ago, according to the Constitution that he was changed. But
Right.
it's not a totalitarian communist state like China is.
Right. And I see China as more in the line of what the USSR was, and I think that is the next threat. And I think potentially, I think we've been in a Cold War with China for a long time. It's just America's not really willing to admit it. I think China is obviously willing to admit it. But
the interesting backdrop of this, if you can, just from an international relations point of view, I just feel like this how do I put this? That there's a much broader conflict about they believe China can be roped into the international community, but Russia is kind of the outlier, big, powerful state that is more nationalistic, and they want to bring it into the international community. I'm talking very loosely. I don't want to get into like the details, but just they want to bring it in, but Putin is just against them. But I think like what has happened from this aggressive foreign policy against Russia, as we've seen a cascade effect where a lot of the authoritarian regimes around the world are being pushed into a coalition together. So we have Saudi Arabia, we have even China has sided with Russia, right? And that's kind of like taking the mask off.
Yeah.
China, Saudi Arabia, like the BRICS have moved against this. And like we saw today, trading in the yuan is way up. It's for trade payments in China, and especially with Russia, that happened a month and a half, 2 months ago. So there's a really dangerous ripple effect that's coming from this aggressive foreign policy in Europe that I believe is like pretty unnecessary. Like you don't need to try to bring them into a sphere or of influence from Western elites that control and manage all of these, climate change and all of these other utopian policies that they want to enact around the world uniformly. It goes back to central planners.
Right.
But from an international relations point of view, going back to like, the Athenians, if you had like a classical realism point of view, it's like, well, we told you so. We told you, we told you this would happen.
Right.
I'm more of a neo-realistic, like Stephen Walden, like Kenneth Waltz sort of perspective. But we told you to, like balance of threat, which is Walt, and balance of power, which is more Kenneth Waltz is famous for. But the threat will balance itself out ultimately. And the other thing about these elites that they don't seem to get is that there's always a defection. It's almost like the prisoner's dilemma. You've probably heard of that, right?
Yeah.
There's almost always you get so many megalomaniacs like, Macron and Trudeau and, maybe, I don't know, Biden, he's a narcissist, but you get so many of them into a room, there's going to be some backstabbing. There's going to be some, like, when do I get mine? Because they all want to be, the human nature hasn't changed. I'll give you the bottom line. It doesn't change either.
Yeah, I mean, somebody out of that group is going to want to be special, and therefore they're going, like you said, they're going to defect. They're going to step away. But I mean, that's who that is out of these globalists. I guess time will tell, right?
Yeah, right.
So we got the word this week that Biden will not be participating in any debates, which is really disappointing because I love seeing RFK Jr. in there, even though I don't agree with any of his politics. He loves the Green New Deal. He wants to ban all guns. I mean, the guy is, not anybody the Republicans necessarily want to embrace.
He's hard left.
A super hard left. And now Trump is signaling, like Biden, he's thinking of not participating in the debates because he thinks the debates are rigged, given who the moderators are. And I think it's like Brett Baer and someone else from Fox News. Is this a good idea for Trump? And what does he gain by not participating in the debates?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is making a calculation, and that is that his Trump supporters already have his back and that he has the base on his side. And so he doesn't need to do a primary debate where he might get into arguments with the moderators or get into tricky conversations about, maybe the COVID pandemic response that might
Oh,
be
yeah.
difficult for him to answer.
Yeah.
But I think that, overall, I am disappointed because I'm somebody who's kind of been in the middle of the DeSantis and Trump camps that I want to see Trump challenged. I want to see, for a specific reason, that I want him to really use it as an opportunity to comfort those people who, you can judge them however you like, but there are certain voters who want to see someone as presidential, calm, cool, rational, steady. And when you have the entire media painting you as a criminal who's been indicted and, corrupt and shady, it is like the ultimate stage for you to go up there. All the eyes are on you. You are in control to some extent of reacting. I mean, you could always flip the tables on your moderators too. That a lot of times gets great applause, and he's mastered that, by the way.
Sure.
But you have the bully pulpit for a little while in a sense, and you can really branch out from your base in a way that other opportunities don't afford you. So I think that he needs to think about that, because if he could even get 10% of these disaffected suburban moms by saying, like what we were talking about, they're going after your kids.
Right.
Okay, that's a good one. Going after your kids, X, Y, Z, lay it out, make a really hard-hitting soundbite that's going to travel on social media, on Twitter, which is open, right? And you grab that and you get somebody who's more moderate and go like, yeah, you're right. I don't like Trump and I don't like Biden, but I want these attacks on my kids to stop. So I'll bite the bullet, so to speak, and I'll go to the polls and I'll vote for Trump because I want the attacks on my kids to stop. I want the trans ideology to stop, for, whatever you think about it, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And so I think he needs to look at that as an opportunity. And DeSantis is not officially in yet, so we don't know what he's. It looked like his traveling all around, the place. It's he's gearing up for a run. Like we're not fooling ourselves. If he doesn't, I'll be extremely surprised.
Yeah.
But
same here.
Yeah, right. So it's a missed opportunity.
I hope he changes his mind. I really do, because I loved the 2016 primaries. We were talking about this off air. It was a cage match. It was Thunderdome. I mean, it was just smash mouth politics that, really you and I had never really seen, because, post Nixon, there was kind of a kindler, gentler politics, as my buddy Larry Schweikert likes to say. It was very genteel. And,
Sure.
My friend from this state and the gentle lady from this state and all this, mumbo jumbo. And Trump just came in and just said, okay, I'm going to turn this into the WWF. And, we're going to fight each other, in the ring. And that's exactly what it was. I think the Trump that went into the first debate and the Trump that came out of the last debate are wildly different creatures, and one that was a knife that had been honed and sharpened, and a much stronger guy from the standpoint, I think, of not only explaining what he wanted to do, but also what he believed in, and also showed real toughness. I mean, nobody had ever called Carly Fiorina a horse face before, not in public. And, nobody called Marco Rubio sweaty little Marco and talked about his little hands. And, nobody accused Ted Cruz's dad of plotting to kill JFK. Or Ben Carson accused him. He said he had a pathological temper and mocked the time that Carson tried to stab his friend. I mean, it was nuts, man.
From my point of view, Brett, I mean, yeah, sure, it was entertaining to a lot of people, but I think he has a chance to flip the script if he wanted to, with more debates, and just be like this strong,
be presidential.
He was successful in a lot of his policies in office. He has a track record to point to.
Yeah,
he can be the voice of reason if he wanted to. A lot of people be like, Donald Trump, voice of reason. You'd be surprised. He's an excellent storyteller.
Yes.
He's good at bonding with audiences, obviously, if he desires to. And if he could kind of change his strategy, he could peel off the necessary 10% of suburban women, independents and moderates.
Yeah.
And that would really be huge in some of these swing states where, like, let's be frank, some of they're kind of hostile terrain for him right now.
Yeah.
The swing states are.
Right.
DeSantis is polling better in some. I'm not saying that holds up one way or the other.
Yeah. And we're a ways out. So
We're a ways out. Exactly. It's
Yeah.
just polling, right? Polling has been terrible. But I mean, he's going into hostile territory in some of these swing states, 2 to 3%. You
Sure.
get that 2 to 3%.
That's all he needs.
And you win.
Yeah.
So why
Yeah,
not?
I'm with you. As much as I love 2016 and I love reminiscing about it, it's because it really was a brawl. I think that this needs to be different. I don't think that he needs to go in like that. I think that what would probably benefit him is what you're talking about, which is a little bit more presidential. I think strong, kind of stoic, and just don't get into the muck, because he's the president. I mean, he's the only guy that's going to be standing up there that has been elected. And the second time around got 10 million more votes. Well,
think about the contrast too. So we just talked about the video with Joe Biden and what tone he is setting out to do, right? So if you stand up to all of that, if you stand right next to a guy who's bombarding you with ultra MAGA extremists and all that, and you just look calm, strong, maybe chuckle, maybe laugh. I mean, it's Trump. He's going to be a little theatric. That's fine. You can do all of that. And then just be strong and be like, here's your record of failures. Let's compare your presidency to my presidency, shall we?
Yeah.
And go down the list. I had GDP growth before the COVID pandemic. That was great. And you're having bank failures.
Yeah.
I mean, has there been bank failures in this country for 50 years? Since the Great Depression, when has there been bank failures? We've got inflation through the roof. We didn't see that during my time in office. So if you want to restore normalcy in America, you have a clear choice in 2024.
Yeah.
You don't have to go into the name calling and the stupid banter. You don't have to, because he's been there, done that.
Yeah.
He has policies to back him up, and they can get into all the name calling they want. But if you stand there with a thick skin and you just deliver that's more effective than getting into the banter, because certain amount of the population, as we said before, they're all about tone. They're all about body language. You're just going to come across looking like the strong, uniting leader that you could possibly trust.
No,
you can't trust a guy who's sitting there talking about extremists and just demagoguing for like 30 or 40 minutes. It's just like, this guy's a joke.
Well, I still can't get over the whispering in his voice. It's just, in the video, I mean, there's no energy,
he was walking today with that maroon. I said his legs looked like they had, there were socks full of dead goldfish. It looked like a wind was going to blow him over, He was just, it wasn't even a saunter. There's something less than a saunter. That's what he was doing. It was, oh my goodness.
He's an old man. On top of that, I always have to remind people that he had brain surgery for an aneurysm.
They downplay that, but you're right.
And there's video of him talking about it where he's like, they sawed the top of my head off to go in. And he's like, literally, no joke. They sawed the top of my head off to go in and take care. And, even the surgeon said, and we reported this on the Political Insider, even the surgeon said that he basically had a 50-50 chance of coming back to normal.
Yeah, I remember that story.
You just think about the trauma that has on the body, especially, people when they're older. It always takes them a lot longer to bounce back from really anything, even a bruise. But having major surgery like that, you're not going to sit here and tell me that didn't affect him, his cognitive abilities. Because when I look at him, I see my grandfather in his late 80s, but my grandfather fought in the Battle of the Bulge. This is called mileage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he doesn't look. I look at my dad, who's a Vietnam vet, and he doesn't look like my grandfather. He's still in his mid 70s, but like that World War II generation, I think aged a whole lot more than even what you and I will ever age. Maybe even the Gen Xers that are Gulf War veterans. Things are just different these days. Medication, stress levels, all that stuff. But Joe Biden looks like a really old man who's just kind of running out of gas at this point and can't even muster the energy to do a voiceover for a re-election campaign video.
Going to your point, my mom was a nursing home worker for a long time, like a nurse, like a rehab nurse. So I would go in there like sometimes early in the morning before school and just like hang out with her or whatever. And, they would come in for breakfast or whatever. And I would sit and I would talk with the, elderly people and so forth. He strikes me as someone who you see the rigid face and the walk and the drawn and like the empty eyes stare at least.
Yeah.
And it just like, that reminds me of somebody who is sitting there and people were taking care of him.
Same here.
And, that's not a judgment on him, but he's running for another 4 years in a time of national crisis.
Yes.
Look, I'm not trying to judge this guy's soul or whatever, but my appeal to him would be like, if you really care about this country, step away.
Oh,
step away. Let somebody, somebody who, endorse somebody. Go ahead, endorse somebody that you
be the kingmaker. Exactly.
And just do the responsible thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get there, but we'll see if there's a dark horse. We saw like the Susan Rice thing.
That was
I'm not
weird.
saying she's going to run, but maybe she works for a campaign or something because it was reportedly sudden, right?
Yeah, that was so weird. I mean,
it was strange. Yeah.
I
guess she wanted to work 2 years, but it was like people didn't see it coming was the reports. You never know for sure what's going on.
Well, was she let go or did she just leave?
I always assume that they walked away or parted ways unless there's a report otherwise. And from what I read, that she just decided to leave.
That's a weird one. Yeah,
It is.
I mean, she was kind of the brains behind so many of the policy decisions, Afghanistan, and on and on and on and on. And I just
the
kind of
brains behind Afghanistan. There's a phrase I don't think I would.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I'll say it.
Withdrawal.
The lack thereof brains.
Right.
But
right.
I mean, all she's doing is just basically she's on the same streak that she was during the Obama administration. I mean, it's bizarre to me because it's like we look at Joe Biden's track record in the last, 2.5 years, and it's appalling to us. It's like we're talking about. It's kind of like the demolition of the America you and I grew up in or born into in the 70s, and but to them, they see progress in all this stuff.
They're activists. They're coming at it from an activist view where they want to take these institutions and use them to promote their agenda. And they're on the side of the angels, and anybody who disagrees with them is on the side of the devil. They feel like we'll eventually get there. Now, never mind that they are actually going for utopia or heaven, which is never existed on this earth.
Right.
And they don't feel like they have any constraints. So that really changes your moral compass into one that is unrecognizable for people from a Judeo-Christian point of view. And they would argue, well, that's just a manifestation of capitalism. And that's, we protect the rich and we, don't care about the poor or whatever. But we don't even hear these kind of ideological arguments anymore, Brett, which is a huge red flag to me. And along with the combination of the corporate collusion with them to promote their agenda is another red flag to me, because they shouldn't be strange bedfellows even if they adopted their principles, but they could be doing what was called there's a theoretical thing. I don't know if a lot of conservatives are aware of this, but they see fascism as an intermediate stage, or like the stench of fascism is something that you tolerate to get to socialism.
Right.
Or another way of putting this is that Lenin said, like, we'll sell the, apocryphally said that, well, they'll sell them the rope that they'll hang themselves with.
Sure. Yeah.
So we're seeing this, and like we're arguing there. I would argue that it's I always try to say this like fascistic, because we're kind of in an intermediate period. So like that framework and the fact that they're all getting filthy rich, and complaining about inequality at the same time, professing to claim about the poor. professing to care about climate change while jet setting around in private jets.
Yeah.
It proves the foundational inclinations of the founders, such as James Madison, who said, like, if men were angels, no government would be necessary.
Right.
And you look at them and they go, they are proving the founders right. Like everything that they cautioned against of centralized power when they devised the federal republic.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I found interesting that we've moved away from is there were institutions that separated power from money. And so, like, for example, the Senate, like the state senates would elect, the state legislatures would elect the senators. You know, it made it harder for corporations to buy all of these elections and to, you know, like through campaign donations or whatever,
Sure.
a black
Sure.
or dark money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or PACs or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to break up power and money in this country to get back to where, or the influence of money. I'm not saying that, you know, we should, you know, confiscate all the wealth of the rich. That's
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
the traditional left-wing argument. But if you look at the zip, you know, the zip codes in Virginia around the DC area, they're all some of the richest in the country. They're all filthy rich.
Yeah.
And this systemic corruption is really, from my deeper, like, from perspective of this, it's really unnecessary in a technologically advanced world where we have nearly instant communication. We have more information, like the democratizing of knowledge that I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. So federalism should really be an even stronger model now than it was at the time of the founding.
I agree.
So there's much more stronger arguments for federalization, for, you know, individual choice and opportunity and all of these things, you know, because, like, I think choice is something that's very what we call, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but like pattern, like your daily pattern, like we usually have choice instantaneously all the time.
Yep.
But then we line up every 2 years and make a single choice that's going to guide us for the next 2 years. Yeah. And then we have every 4 years, we have different elections, we make different choices, and that's going to be the way it's going to go for the next 4 years. I don't think this is necessary. I think it's an ancien regime that we're living through. We're in the death throes right now. The empire is striking back. And you know, the next permutation of this, we need to have a new ideological revolution that has just not been forthcoming in our universities. They've been extremely disappointing to me. The lack of novel ideas. They have a neo-Marxist template of name calling and you know, criticizing everything, but nothing to really stand on and nothing to show for their supposedly elite status as being the most intellectual people in the country, and that we're all supposed to listen to them and they're supposed to be in this exalted status. Hey, the proof is in the pudding. Like, let's take a look at everywhere where leftists in this country have ruled essentially one party rule. Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Baltimore, New York. These places are turning into like vestiges of third world countries. They are crumbling. They're dilapidated. And at the same time, they're trying to tell us, oh, we care. You know, do they care about crime? Do they really care about the environment if they can't even clean the streets? We're supposed to give you trillions of dollars to fight climate change when you can't keep the streets clean?
No, I mean, look at California. It burns down every summer. I mean, literally, California and LA County burn down. And, you know, people like Gavin Newsom, who, you know, aren't really a governor. He just plays one on TV. That's funny. You know, they get reelected. They survive recounts, even though they blatantly cheat. You know, I just think that, like, it's fine. You know, if that's what you want to continue to vote for, or import a bunch of illegal aliens to come in and vote for, that's fine. I don't have to live there. And, you know, that's why I left, you know, the purple state of Arizona, my home state, for Texas, because, you know, I'm down in Pima County, Tucson, completely blue area. We have a Marxist for a mayor who hangs the Black Lives Matter flag from the 6-story courthouse building. You know, homeless, you know, the roads are a mess. I mean, you know, on and on, you know, infrastructure to, you know, homelessness and violence and crime. It's just, it's a mess. And then on top of that, I can't trust the vote. So what am I supposed to do? Sit there and endure that and try and save it and become a martyr? Or do I do what Washington would do, which is the strategic retreat? Go
Mhm.
and be among your people and bolster your supporters and your strength and come at it from a standpoint of power and force. And that's why I moved to not only a red state, but a red county
Mhm.
and a place where Republicans basically have a supermajority. And it's beautiful. I'm much happier. I miss my home.
Sure, me too.
I miss my home
Exactly.
state. But like seriously,
Mhm.
man, um, allergy season aside, this place is fantastic.
Well, the weather is great.
Yeah,
So much sunshine, you can hardly take it.
and that's I'm used to that. I mean, the Sunshine State. I wanted at least 200.
Oh, yeah.
At least 200 days of sunshine. You get plenty of that out
Well, I'm
here.
from New York, so
Yeah. So I mean, it's a big difference for
yeah,
you. Not
yeah.
as much of a difference for me because I'm kind of coming from. I'm only coming about 1,800 miles, but at the same time, you don't know how bad it is in your home state until you leave it for something better. You might have some
Right.
semblance of how bad it is, but it wasn't until I came here and I've spent a year here where I'm just kind of like, wow, people aren't as intense.
There you go.
People wear MAGA hats out in the open,
They
and like
can, yeah, sure.
and they're not getting pummeled. They're not in fear of getting mugged or violence against them.
Mhm.
It's a well-run town. Like I said, Texans are really laid back, which was kind of a surprise to me. But I just think
Mhm.
life's too short as well to like, if you have the opportunity to get out of a blue state, get out of a blue state and go someplace, where it's red and you can be among your people. It's a huge
Yeah,
difference.
absolutely. I mean, like I kind of live in a, quieter North Dallas, sort of suburban area.
I love
You have
suburbia.
your own
That's where I'm at.
property, you have
Yes.
your own spread. You don't have people in your face all the time, uh, you know, being
Yeah.
rude to you. So it makes for a generally more congenial lifestyle,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
And there's diversity here. There's a big myth,
yeah,
like in New York, like there's no diversity in the South, like in terms of like ethnic populations or
not
whatever.
true.
This is like the most diverse place I've ever seen. I live kind of in an area where they have some tech industry and some
Mhm.
big corporations, stuff like that. There's all sorts of, Chinese, Indian, Korean,
Sure.
and you know what? We're all pretty much laid back. We're not like so self-conscious about all of this stuff, which has always been my complaint about the Northeast. They're
Well,
way too
yeah,
self-conscious about race and gender and all of these
yeah,
labels. And like
yeah.
at the end of the day, I just want to sit around. Are you an a-hole or are you a normal person to talk to?
Right.
I don't care about the other stuff. You can keep it. You can keep all these labels and pronouns and just keep them. Just keep them. I don't need to know this stuff. I don't care about it. I care about you as a person,
Yeah.
what you've done, where you're
Individual.
going, how you're feeling.
Yeah.
I don't care about this other packaging. It's like
It-
we
It's
don't control that. So
it,
it's like
it's
boring. It's boring.
it is boring. It is boring because it's so one dimensional.
Mhm.
And people have far more depth than that, frankly.
Yeah,
But I mean,
exactly.
it's like I've lived in Phoenix, Denver, Chicago, in the city, LA, lived in Venice, lived in Southern California. So I mean, I've been around, and I knew when I found this place that it was where I wanted to go. And it's funny because it's very diverse, and I find that I'm basically in a very quiet suburban neighborhood. I mean, it is pure burbs, and I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the burbs.
Mhm.
And it's funny because it's like I never figured I'd be back here, but the fact that it's boring, it's predictable, and
Mhm.
I say those I say that with great delight.
That's right.
And the people who are here for the exact same reason, man. And you have black and Hispanic
We're
and
not looking for
Indian.
things to get angry about, right, Brett? We're not looking at
No, man.
we don't have to come up with these extravagant theories like CRT and white grievance and all the we don't need all that drama.
That's not fulfilling.
We just want to have a good life.
Yeah.
We want to raise our kid, if you have kids, you want to raise them in a good, stable environment. See them grow, see them, become happy and go through their life stages and be successful on their own terms.
Yeah.
Don't a lot of people just, that's the thing you were talking about experience. I think when you get past your 30s, you know, into 35, you tend to become a little bit more sober and
Sure.
you temper your expectations. You don't want a politician to save you from something, from
No.
your life. You don't
No.
think that somebody out there is oppressing you when you don't even know them. They're not in your community. They're not around you. I don't care what somebody in some other state thinks about this or that. Did they, I don't want to see, white supremacists going around putting burning crosses and stuff, but that's an objective thing that you can look at and say that's
Right.
bad behavior. He or she's breaking a certain crime. They're doing a certain crime. You know what you do? You lock those idiots up.
Yeah.
And you don't hold the entire community across the country accountable for what some idiots who are the fringe of the fringe do on either side. Like Antifa. I mean, I don't know how many there are, probably several hundred. It's an informal network of people. They're kind of the extreme, but you know what? The media glamorization makes more of them.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of the opposite side of what we've been trying to do, and that's push the extremes to the margins, push the fringe to the fringe. Don't give them the attention. But this media whore, this attention whore media, it always gets attracted to these, outsiders. They feel like they have to pick sides, or they're activists or what. Like they glamorize, Antifa. Well, not glamorize. I think that's too strong a word, but they're not critical about Antifa to the extent that a lot of people would prefer. And on the other side, they'll talk about the January 6 people who are just, the extremist groups, people who went there are just, they're miscreants. Okay. Like they're not good people. In the mix were MAGA tourists, right? Who went there, and it's just a weird scene, obviously. But they're extremes, and trying to do what Joe Biden did in his video and try to color all his opposition with these fringe people who are, I don't know these people. Like I would never go there looking for trouble like the extremists did.
Yeah.
So anyways, what I'm saying is we're stuck in the middle. We need voices.
Yeah.
Or at least people with counter narratives to push back and to challenge the state narratives. Like Tucker, which we talked about, but they label him as extreme because he just doesn't agree with them and he challenges their narratives.
Sure.
From my point of view.
Yeah.
And sure, he takes strong, counter positions. I get it. He's good at getting attention, and that's what a journalist does in some ways, brings attention to things that you care about, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's people like you and me, we live in these Texas suburbs or whatever. Our daily life is so detached from the stuff the radicals are saying, from the stuff that Joe Biden is saying, from our daily experience. And I think when you have a Trump who is being very angry and pushing back and attacking his critics, it doesn't provide enough of a foil to the talking heads on the left that just keep saying extreme stuff all the time.
Yeah.
It becomes noise. People tune it out. And they feel like they're pushed into a choice between two lesser evils. I'm talking about moderates and the independents. Sure. I don't feel that way personally.
Yeah.
Because I look at policies. I don't look at personalities, but I'm just talking about the moderates and independents here. Mm-hmm. And if he would just do what we said in the debates and just be strong and reassure people that America can still be salvaged, that we can still have freedom, we can still have independence, we can stop having agendas of any kind rammed down our throat, not just woke stuff, but any kind of agenda is unnecessary. We don't want it in our lives. Mm-hmm. It would grant us a reprieve while you structurally try to reform institutions. I brought up the Schedule F's thing, for example. All ideologues hit the bricks.
Yeah.
You need to structurally reform these institutions. So it's not like you're doing nothing. You're pulling out of the WHO, which Trump did. Totally fine with that. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying you do some structural reconstitution. You don't need you need solutions, you need policies, you need ideas, and a debate is a great platform to show that. And that's what a lot of us are looking for. We're craving. So we don't need the hyperbole. The people who crave the hyperbole, they know Trump can do hyperbole. They're already on your side.
That's true. He doesn't need to win those people. Yeah, no, that's a great point. He has been uploading a lot of policy to his Rumble channel.
That's cool.
And there's some good stuff in there. I think he's kind of, packing that now, and he'll have it there for either the debates or the general. But I mean, it's going to be there for him when he needs it. But he's rolling out these videos, I think, almost daily with policy, which
And there's been good
obviously
videos, sure.
nobody's talking about. They're just talking about him and DeSantis fighting. But you know what I'd love to see, talking about the whole Schedule F thing, if they can fire these people and just clean house. What would also be great, tying into, your argument towards more federalism, is why not relocate some of these institutions to Midwest flyover country states where we can pack them culturally with people who love this country and believe in American exceptionalism and Western culture.
That's an interesting counter argument. I was thinking more in terms of like virtual governance, where they
Sure.
have to stay in their home state.
You
They
don't need
go.
to brick
They
and
don't go
mortar
to
necessarily.
Washington D.C. They don't go towards K Street lobbyists.
Sure.
You can track lobbyists and corporate influencers and so on a lot more closely in your home state, and you have local reporting who know the terrain really well.
Yeah.
You have a lot of great local reporters at some of these outlets.
Yeah.
So and they're like a lot more qualified and shrewd about navigating the local politics and state politics than national journalists necessarily can be.
Sure.
So I think like we would have more monitoring of them, which is what they need. Basically ankle bracelets, if you can think about that.
Yeah.
Like we know where you are. Oh, you're
going.
going to DC. Who are you going to meet? Why are you going there? It really should be the other way around. So
give them all low jacks.
Use the internet, use virtual governance. I mean, the swamp has you could literally break up the swamp, and I don't think we would miss it. We could figure it out.
I mean, you could empty, like Elon Musk has done, you could empty 20 to 30% of that town.
Yeah, you could carry in a kitchen sink into the Congress.
And I think that's a great point. You don't necessarily need brick and mortar to house these new people. You could just relocate maybe some kind of hub in the Midwest and just start hiring virtual people.
Fascinating thing about that is kind of goes to what we were saying, and you kind of applying what you're saying. You would have the local cultures be a lot more reflective of the decision making.
Yes.
And the representatives would be closer tied to the people, but also the staff members would be more organically in touch with the people of the local terrain, and you would get much more diversity in government. What a novel idea. They love diversity on the left. I'm sure they love our.
They say they do. Yeah, they say they do.
They would love our proposal, Brett. I'm sure.
AOC, yeah, a ringing endorsement from AOC.
Yes, I'm sure she wants to go live back in the Bronx where the people don't like her very much because she does
actually nothing. I heard she's a dynamite bartender, and I encourage her to get back to
I would
the
love
roots.
I'd like to see if she could do an old fashioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's wrap it up with some fun stuff. What movie or TV shows are you watching right now? Are you watching anything that you could recommend to our viewers?
I'm a sports fanatic, so I've been following the Knicks and Aaron Rodgers thing. Obviously, that wrapped up today.
Yep.
But outside of that, I'm kind of a binge watcher where I kind of have my favorites and I just watch my favorites a lot, like, Better Call Saul or whatever like that. But the latest movie I saw the latest Creed movie, which I really liked. I thought that was a very entertaining, strong movie, not very political. It was good. But I'm kind of a sports fanatic. I mean, people who follow me on Twitter may see the occasional, I'll do like 30 tweets and then the website will be like, yes, the Jets did something good for a change, but yeah, so
very cool. I think, the binge watching, it's fun. It's from the standpoint that, you and I used to have to go to a local video store or rental place to get stuff. And now it's just all at our fingertips. You can stream just about anything. I just bought, because you can't find it on streaming. I just bought season 1 of Moonlighting because I wanted to go back and watch.
I loved that show when I was a kid.
Show. Yeah, me too. And I haven't watched it since then, but I wanted to, Bruce Willis's cognitive decline and his health issues, got me thinking about where I first saw that guy. It's like with Tom Hanks, it was Bosom Buddies, which
he had great chemistry with Sybil Shepherd. That was like something that was kind of hard to turn away from. I wasn't old enough to even know what dating was. All I know is there was some kind of tension going on between them.
Yes.
I didn't know what it was, but it was hard to turn away from. I was just kind of like,
they had real chemistry, and that, obviously that sexual tension plays off on camera. You and I both were kind of like, didn't necessarily know what that was because we weren't at that point in our lives, but at the same time, wildly entertaining show. I remember it was something that my mom also enjoyed watching that we could watch together that wasn't like Dynasty. Funny enough, I did binge that over COVID, and that's a fantastic show.
I never saw that. I might have to put that in my little nuggets of things to watch.
Funny enough, the first season kind of sucks because there's no Joan Collins. It doesn't
I see.
Doesn't kick into gear until season 2. Yeah, and she was obviously the kind of the femme fatale, but that, and I watched over COVID. I went back because I was kind of burnt out on new stuff, and I watched all 12 seasons of Dallas, which is also
that was the other one that came to mind. Yeah, similar to Dynasty.
Yeah, killer show, and that's when I started realizing that Yellowstone is basically a modern Dallas that people have fallen in love with, which I think is a good thing because I think that's a pretty cool show, and one that even its politics, which it does show, are definitely not center left. In fact, they mock the left a whole lot more than I think characters are represented on the left, which I think is very positive.
Yeah.
So, did you check out Cobra Kai?
I have seen part of it. I saw like some episodes. I like the conceit of it. I like the premise of it. I just so many options. Like that's one. Like in my favorites, I will watch that sometime.
That's one that's great to binge, and one that actually openly mocks the left and the woke culture, which I think is kind of amazing because
I'll have to watch more of that.
It's survived, and they're going to wrap it up here with the 5th season. They're going to be done, but and of course you'll have spinoffs. But
all right, I'll have to check that out more than I have. So
yeah, and it's funny. I used to be a huge NBA fan, and then they kind of lost me, like probably about maybe like about 10 years ago. And now I'm starting to watch again, watching my sons, and it's it's fun. The game has changed so much, but at the same time, it's kind of cool.
Did you see what Phil Jackson said the other day?
Yeah.
I was definitely he triggered. It was Jalen Rose.
I saw that
on ESPN, and he was really PO'd at what Jackson said, basically to leave your politics off the court. His frame of reference was the bubble year where they were wearing the different uniforms, like justice or equality and stuff on the back of their jerseys, and like everything was like Black Lives Matter center.
They had it on the court. They had it on the. I remember on the basketball.
Yeah, I wrote a lengthy article about that, talking about how that was similar to Michael Jackson's Republicans buy sneakers too approach. And of course, he had the great documentary that just came out, Air. I believe it was. I saw that as well.
Was that good?
I recommend it. I think it's very good. Yeah, I think like the acting from Affleck leaves something to be desired, but he doesn't have like a prominent role. Matt Damon is very good. In that. And of course, Jordan doesn't appear in it himself, right? Except for just like documentary footage that they show. But it was very interesting.
Awesome.
But yeah, like the NBA playoffs have been better the more they moved away from the woke explicit stuff, kind of like the NFL has. During the Kaepernick reign, whatever that was. No, it's much more watchable now, I believe, but it is a lot of long distance shooting and stuff, which is way different than what I grew up with, but
same here.
It is what it is.
I miss them banging in the paint, and I just miss a little bit more physical. I mean, guys like Barkley and Bill Laimbeer and and others. Xavier McDaniel. I mean,
God, the X-Man. When I was a kid growing up, I had a friend. He was like 4th grade. He was like 6'4" or something. He was huge, and we and him would just run the court. I was the X-Man, and he was like Akeem. I mean, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
But I mean, these guys were brawlers. I mean, they were tough. I mean, they were tough dudes, especially Barkley, because Barkley wasn't that big. I mean, they list him as like 6'5" or 6'6", but he's really like 6'4".
That's right. Well, he was explosive early on. I was a Knicks fan, so I guess I liked Oakley from that school of thought.
Yeah, dude, that guy was a badass. Do you remember that Suns Knicks brawl?
Oh my goodness,
where they cleared the bench, and who came off the bench?
Jeff Van Gundy,
and he punched Danny Ainge, and he wasn't even wearing a uniform. He was sitting the game out. Doc Rivers. Off the bench and just clocked Danny Ainge.
Doc Rivers. Yeah, hit.
It's on. It's on YouTube because I looked it up.
Recently. Oh, it's great. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean,
Some people talked about a recent. I think it was the Clippers series. Was it the
yeah,
Clippers series? Yeah,
yeah. I
they were,
think.
and it's like, oh, you didn't see the Suns versus Knicks.
Well,
Yeah,
now these guys get suspensions. I mean, just for stepping over the line, or getting off the bench, or getting out of their chair. I mean, it's not
well,
like,
that's what happened to the Knicks in the playoffs. They
yeah,
lost. So many guys got thrown out for that.
right. So
Yeah,
I mean,
ended their season.
players aren't going to risk that like they would back then. But it was definitely a different game. I think
Yeah,
it's more attuned to TV now because it's faster and you have higher
sure,
scores.
higher
But I mean,
scoring.
it's part of. I mean, the Suns really kind of almost played a part in that. A lot with KJ and Steve Nash. I mean, Jason Kidd. Those were all,
Sure, Thunder Dan.
yeah, and Cotton Fitzsimmons and others. I mean,
Yeah.
they were like, running gun. That was kind of the Suns' sort of MO.
Oh yeah,
And you see
they
that
were a
more and
fun
more.
team to watch. They were kind of ahead of their time in some ways.
I think
Yeah.
so. I think so. I mean, I think that you still need to play defense, and that's always been kind of the Achilles heel to that running gun style.
Oh
is,
yeah,
you're
you have an
just
off night and you're done.
pretty much. But I look at these scores now, and I'm just kind of like, wow. I mean, these guys are just obviously
Well, the
launching
Knicks
threes.
series with the Cavs have not been typical, like in terms of the high scoring.
Really?
It's
Okay.
been a defensive brawl, and now the Cavs are the number one rated defense in the league, and the Knicks have improved their defense over time, and you're a good rebounding team. So it's been,
Okay.
and so the Suns were like under 80, and the Knicks were under 100
Yeah.
in the last game, and it's just kind of like a little. It's not quite old school, but it's a defensive battle, so it's still there, I guess,
Yeah.
depending on what teams you follow.
hmm
But
Yeah.
they're the outliers. Most teams are run and gun now, not
Yep.
like back then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a different game. Did you check out Winning Time on HBO?
No, that escaped my radar.
That's really, really, really good. It's about that first season with Magic, and
Oh, okay.
this is the series that Jerry West was threatening to sue HBO over his portrayal. I mean,
Really?
he's that
Okay.
pissed off. And the funny thing is, when you watch this show and you see how they portrayed Jerry West, it makes
Oh,
perfect sense that Jerry West in real life would want to sue HBO.
yeah, right.
It's perfect, man. But like the casting's done really well, and it's kind of this miracle season in a lot of ways. I don't want to give it away for those that
Yeah.
live through it. I told Dean Cain about it because
Oh, okay.
he had season tickets, like, and so he was like, dude,
Yeah.
he's like, I was at those games
Really?
the first year
Yeah.
of with Magic, and he's like, I remember that whole thing. He's like, it was unbelievable. The Laker, they had the club and the whole lifestyle that was kind of reinvented by Jerry Buss that first year. But it's really well done, and it's it's kind of encompasses capitalism and dreams and
That reminds me of Air a
having a
little bit.
vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really want to see that. I'm glad you brought that up. That is going to be your movie recommendation for us, is
Okay.
to go out and check
There
out
you go.
Air. But yeah, I kind of look at it the same thing. I mean, you're kind of profiling somebody that had a vision, had a dream, and was able to bring it to fruition, which is like, the ultimate American story. Where else in the world does that happen, and happen so often? Nowhere.
Yeah,
Here.
you should watch it if not for the speech that Damon gives at the end of it. So I think like it's kind of sums up it kind of in a nutshell. And the nostalgia feel of Air is fantastic as well. It takes you right back to the 80s. It's that's worth the price of admission, right?
Absolutely. No, I'm all about making America 80s again.
Yeah, same.
We need to go back to that and go back to that pop culture, and
Totally.
yeah,
Have
absolutely.
more fun.
Oh yeah,
Have a sense of humor.
it was
Lighten up.
it was a
Get to
party.
work.
No,
And stop the helicopter parroting and all of
Yeah.
this, the masking and all this other, the fear and all of this stuff. Let it all go.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath. Everybody get back to work. Stop screwing around. Stop causing a fuss. Stop complaining. Stop being a victim. Just live your life and be
Yes.
happy.
No,
Be productive.
I totally agree. No, that the 80s were as much fun as they looked for
They
people
were.
that
Totally.
did not grow up in that era, and we need to return to those those
They
days.
do.
So
hopefully this movie contributed a little bit of a taste of that era.
it sounds like it. Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
like it. Now I want to see it even more.
Good.
Well, sadly, we're out of time. Kyle, go
All
ahead
right,
and
Brett.
give everyone your social media coordinates so everyone knows
Yeah.
where to find you and what you're up to.
So on Twitter, you can go to @Kyle N.A. Becker. I have my Substack there. You can see read some of the articles that I referenced. It's at thekylebecker.substack.com.
Okay.
Some interesting articles. I had some stuff about, like what we talked about with the NBA, it's a wide range of stuff. Hopefully something you find interesting that suits your taste. But anyways, thanks, Brett, for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, you bet, man. We'll do it again.
It was great meeting with you.
Yeah, you too. Appreciate it.